Welcome back, everybody. As from the last episode, this Sport Replica was on the ground and then back up on the doll so I can move it around. There's going to be so much cleanup work with this. It's amazing. But, you know, as long as we get the base thing done, you know, cutting and re-welding stuff is fine. That's why I tacked most of the stuff in, because that way I can, if I did it wrong, which I did do some stuff wrong with this, and it's not wrong as in what I put in, it's wrong as in my measurements. I screwed up. I'm about a centimeter off. I have to cut, shorten, put it back. That's it, you know? And it's not that bad. We have to get onto the rear of this, but first we have to finish the front suspension. We have to do the 5-lug conversion on the A2. As you remember, we took the front hubs off of a 5000 or a 200 Quattro in Europe, and you know, of the early version, I think pre-87 or pre-88, and they pretty much pushed right in on the rear of the 4000 Quattro or 80 Quattro struts on the rears, not the fronts. The fronts are smaller. That is the dilemma, and we're trying to do a 5-lug conversion to the front, and we want to keep it the same width, or I am attempting to keep it the same width as the 4000. And I went through everything in my big heaping hunking pile of junk out there of Audi parts that I've just collected over 25 years, and trying to figure out what I did. And I think I figured out a combination where, you know, I'm not spending any money, you know, and you might be able to search and find this stuff. If you have a 5000, it's a lot simpler, but let's get right on to doing the struts right now for the front, because I think, actually, I thought it was kind of cool, and they're not bad, so let's try it. This is my iteration for trying to make the 4000 Quattro strut fit. What I did was I took an A4 hub. An A4 hub, the main diameter is the same diameter as the 4000 Quattro hub, except that on the internal part, on about this much, it has a step up. So you can't use the the 4000 Quattro bearing. You have to use an A4 bearing, which is too big to be pressed into this hub assembly. What did I do? I turned it down on the lathe. Because I really don't want anybody to turn down it, because most people don't have a lathe. I'm trying to do this so you in your garage can do this. Put this in, okay, pressed in, went around, perfect, great. Took the A4 shaft, put it in the back. No way is it gonna fit. It is huge. It is massive compared to the strut housing here. I would have to chop most of it off, and then you're going into the possibility of it breaking. It's not worth it. Okay. And this was a rear hub. So what I did was I grabbed another rear hub assembly, and I looked at the bearings, and I looked at the ones that I pressed out of the 4000, or ones that I pressed out for the rear of the 4000, that 5000 hub assembly. Took that hub assembly, yep, A4 bearing, presses right in. The A4 hub presses right in, but you still have to cut the CV shaft down. Oh, okay. All right, so I'm sitting there looking at it going, well, all right, well, what am I going to do now? Well, I basically went out and I took the 200 Turbo Quattro 20-valve struts that I have that have been sitting there for 15 years. Brought them in, A4 hub, the rears will not fit. They spin inside the spline shaft. Then I went out and I says, well, is there anything I can do to make... Then I started researching on a place called Rock Auto. All the different hub shafts and bearings and all that stuff. And it looks like the 200 Turbo Quattro has the same CV joint as the A4. So I looked around going, do I have any front struts? Any front half shafts? Went out, pulled them out of a 99 Avant. Right in. Oh my God. And I'm going to show you right now what I'm doing to make this thing all fit up. So without further ado, listen to me jabber. Let's go over here and I'll show you what I did. This right here is the Audi 200 Turbo Quattro 20-valve strut. The ones that everybody complained about because of the UFO brake. As you can see, these mounting points right here are for the UFO brake calipers. Not going to use them. This actually gives us an advantage, because what I'm doing is putting a plate across here where I'm mounting or cutting and drilling and tapping the bolts for the AP racing brakes, basically, pretty much. What we're going to do here, I'll show you a little bit later, but I want to show you what you have to do first to make the CV joint actually fit. This right here is the A4 CV shaft. You can see it's about the same length as the 4000 Quattro, but this is what we got. And the reason why I didn't use the 200 turbo one, take a look. Is because of this, the size of the rear CV joints. These rear CV joints, we basically, you know, we nicknamed them 930 joints because I think they're the same thing as on a 930. They have a big and a small one. And I believe these things fit on the 7.5-inch Cosworth dip, and these fit on the 7.5-inch Mercur dip, if I remember correctly. Don't put me to it, but that's what I thought it was. And we can always pop them off and put them on the, you know, because I save all these things anyway. And these front, see, I dug it out of the, I dug it out of the dirt pile, and they've been sitting out there for years. But this spline shaft is the same diameter as this spline shaft. The problem is, right here, you see where the ring, the teeth are for the ABS ring? Well, you have an ABS ring right here. We need to get rid of this because it's pressed on. Save this ring. If you own an A4, what happens is the CV joint gets rusty and snaps its ring, and that's why you get an ABS light. I've welded these things in the past, filed them down, put them back on, and the ABS system works great. The light goes out. But that's what you have to, you know, save these just in case if you own an A4. It'll probably happen if you live in a salt type area, you know. So let's first pull this ring off. It's really simple. Doesn't take long. Just tap it. Oh, you want the bolt on something hard so it actually you can transmit the actual force to the ring. And do it sideways. You have to stretch it out like this, because the if you put too much stress on it, it will break. It turns. It doesn't sound like it's rubbing. Doesn't feel like it. I won't know until I really lock it up, but let's do what the next thing we have to do. Take a look at this. This is going to be used for a coilover. See this? This is a welding line. So what that means, this is steel. I am going to be using the steel portion of this to make a coilover. First thing though, what we got to do is we have to set up the steering angle and where everything's going to be, because we're pretty much going to weld off of this the steering arm and wherever we want it to be. How do we want it done? Well, do we need this? This is useless. This is useless because we're probably going to be using this though, because I want a larger diameter of tie rod in. And actually it's pretty tough, and I can build something out of this because, you know, it's kind of cool. We can also shorten the distance up here to make a quick rack. It's a little cheap hillbilly trick that, you know, you can do. But what I'm going to do first, I'll show you, is I'm going to cut this tube off, and then we're going to do some other stuff, which is, I'll show you what I'm doing. This is just, you know, not meant for road use, okay? So let me just cut this thing off. As you can tell, my jacket's open. It's getting warmer here. Not by much, but it's getting warmer. Cut it. You got to clean the burrs off from underneath here, just so we have a receiver. Now we need the shock and the spring donor. I know, it's getting bad. Yes, I'm going to use it. You're probably sitting there thinking to yourself, what is he going to do? What I did is I measured the inside diameter of this housing. It is very, very close to the external diameter of this housing. What I'm going to do is cut this hub assembly off and slide it in here so we can sit there, adjust we can use the original steering linkage in steering rack. Everything's the same, so we don't have to do anything there. Right here, so we can set our height where we want it and how we want it with just, with just sliding it in here, because it'll press fit in here. I might have to use one tack where I can easily cut it off. That's the whole thing, cut it right off, so we can move everything around. That's in the final cleanup station, but I want to get this on there. And people say, oh, it's going to break. Well, Ford, if you see the struts, have this much going into an assembly that clamps down. No, I don't have any Focus or Merkur Kazi hubs here, but that's basically what they do. This should be fine. I'll just tap it inside there, and let me just cut this thing off. What's it going to hurt? See this? This is the 4000, and what I'm going to be doing with the other hub assembly right there, doing the same thing, cutting it out, bending these things in, and creating and using how can I put spacers or tubes or something like that inside there. So when the coilover comes in and clamps it, it won't crush. And this is all steel, so I can gusset it all through here, and it'll be just as strong, What we have to do now is we have to trim this all up and grind it down. So I'm going to trim it with this, then I'm going to get my other grinder with a grinding wheel and just start grinding all the rust off of it. What we can do now is we can install it, put one tap right here, because this is pretty much where it's supposed to go. We'll have the control arm underneath that jack it up, and then when I have the steering rack in, I can place it where I want, like this. I cut the tack, place where I want it, and then retack it. Actually, I might just let it sit in there. Next thing is I got to put it in. Duh. Okay. Now the strut's in. I'm glad there's enough resistance in between both halves, top and bottom. And one thing, remember what I keep telling people, oil the snot out of everything. Because there is rust on that inside, but big thing is just oiling it all up. Still going to be a bitch to pull apart, but this is something. Let me go jack this thing up, and I'll put the Coupe GT subframe on it and control arms, and we'll see how it looks. Let's stick the subframe up. Right now, with the bushings half gone, and I'm just going to put it in there just to sit there. Because I actually want to put this one on the ground too. We got to get the steering rack in first. Let's put this up. This is the 4000 steering rack. I have everything, it's all pushed up against where it's supposed to be. All I have to do is I'll put the tie rod ends in, because all we're doing it is to get a relationship of where everything is. Let me show you one thing here though. This is the tie rod end assembly. One thing you should definitely do before you put in all these used parts is what I did is I lubed everything up, the entire assembly, so you can just easily bring it out, bring it back. And what I like to do is I like to drive them all the way in as far as both of they go, so when you turn them out, they turn out in even succession, so you don't have one a longer bit of the adjuster inside one other end. So you get the full adjustment range and you get the full strength at the time. Oh, I forgot to say it. The bolts on the tie rod, on the steering rack to the tie rod assembly have to be full thread. They can't have a shoulder. Because what happens is they go all the way through the rack, you have a nut on the bottom and you tighten it up. That is their mentality or their methodology of keeping everything together. Very tight. I mean, actually it's a really good system. And as you can see, I oiled up all the bolts. And, oh, I forgot to oil that. So I'll just do that and we'll put those in. We have the strut in assembly and the tie rod, the control arm that doesn't fit. Here is the assembly that's all nice and movable now. How do we set this? Hey, look at this. Now we can just do that. Put that right there, put a nut on it, and pretty much I'm just going to put one really, really small tack on here. What's the forces? All you need to do is hold it up and down. That's it. Everything else is being, side to side, everything is being taken up by this strut. The control arm, I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to take the bolts off, and I'm going to use an extension like we did on the back of the Sport Quattro just to have the ball joint come out and attach it. I just want this thing stable. That's all I want it to be. Then we're going to drop it down and see exactly what it looks like on the ground. After that, we start on the fuel tanks on the Sport Quattro. We start on the fuel tanks on this because that's the last, I'd say, major component that we're building around. Because we needed the fenders on to make the car look like a replica. Then we needed the suspension on to build it into the fenders. Now we need the rear of the trunk because we have to do the rear. We didn't really fit the rears, so we need the fuel system in the trunk to make everything work. And the whole thing is, in order to get the gas doors right, we have to get the trunk in there, and there's a whole lot of cutting, a whole lot of welding, and a whole lot of rust. After we finish that, then we can come forward again and start looking at all the rust situation here. There's like, isn't this lovely? Start looking at that rust situation and start building back and forth and getting the floor pans correct. Once the floor pans are correct, then we can start getting more and more progress. But we still have tons of shit work. So let me get on to that, and I'll get the welder. I'll tack this, put a bolt in there after I oil it up, and make this all work. Let me pop onto the other side, and we will get this thing all done. Here it is. Not much I can say. I mean, the thing is, it's sitting high because it's sitting high. That's what it is. That's how the suspension, because how was I supposed to know what's going to happen? We don't. We're just doing this, going off the cuff on this stuff. As the astute of you know, this is actually a TRX wheel. These are TRX tires, and if you take a look on Alan Henry's book, in 1983's 1000 Lakes Rally, they basically use these wheels. You can tell by the dish. The standard 15x7s only come out to here, and this probably gave it another, 3/4 of an inch to an inch in width. They're huge tires. They're 230, 45, 390s, and can't buy them anymore, unfortunately. But I have these. As you can see, they're pretty dirty. They've been sitting on the shelf for an awful long time. The A4 front, it works. It pushes out the suspension far enough where it's sitting relatively level, because when you push the camber out to make it even, it'll be right even with this, with the fender. If you look back there, that's the 4000 rear setup. As you can see, if we bring that out 1.5 inches, it'll equal this and it'll look much better. Especially when the car's a lot lower, because it will be lower because it's on coilovers. This decision of doing the A4s, that actually worked out really well, and that was, you know, because that was so much easier. I'm going to be doing that with the A4 struts, and the rear A4 axles, and use the 20 valve turbo hubs in the back from the 200 Quattro with the 20 valve, the 91. I just have to get some axles. I have to find some early A4 axles, and I think it should be fine. We will get on to that later, but that's going to be one of the cleanup methods because we got untold cleanup on these cars. But next thing is we're doing the rear ends. We're doing the trunk areas and the whole rear end on that, and doing the rear end of the Quattro. I mean the Sport Quattro, so we can get that stuff squared away, and then we can start moving forward to get more systems done because we can get the fuel system in. We got the drive line in. Is it good or hooked up or working? No, absolutely not. But it's in. And then we can go from there because everything else is, you know, let's replace this bushing, let's replace that bushing, we're going to do this, going to do that. You know, that's part of the building, but getting the initial setup is getting the initial setup. Oh, it's a long road, you know, but I'm nothing special. Anybody, you can do it. Anybody can do it. I'm just a redneck hillbilly. Or up here, just recycling, you know, recycling hillbilly, that's it. Up here, you can do it. I want you to do it. You know, it's something interesting when you see a car that was nothing and spread out on the floor and it gets to this point, even though I'm halfway done. Not even remotely done. But it's cool. And that's all I care about. And I hope you care about it because it's kind of neat. So I'm going to end this. Thank you very much for watching it. I hope it wasn't too long. I'm trying to get everything shortened down, but certain things that really tedious stuff is I have to keep it long just to show you where to, you know, what I did. And hopefully we're going to just sectionalize and just do a bit by bit by bit, and hopefully, I don't know, maybe by the end of summer, middle of winter, it should be done. It's a lot of work, but it's pretty cool. Hey, thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a great day. Bye now.